right? Interpolation, right? You guys, we touched on this last week, the Nakud system. Y'all remember what's the difference between the Nakud system versus the Matrix Lectionis? Y'all remember the difference between the two? What is it, prophetess? Mark and character. Which one is the mark? The Nakud is the mark. And the character is the what? Matrix Lectionis. Does that make sense? These are vowel systems, all right, that they assign to the text. They attach to not the text, but our language, right? Remember we did this a few weeks ago, and we can do it again. And you pull out your phones, and this is going to confirm where we're going at with it. Pull out your phones, all right? Go to Google and type in accent space etymology.
You invite him to indicate accent.
Whose accent? Exactly, their accent that they superimposed over the text. So you see two systems represented there. Mark is what? The Nakud or Naquad, right? Character, this is where you get vowel letters, which is the Matrix Lectionis. Deals with what? Vowel letters. Does that make sense, everyone? So whenever we see Nakud, remember, that's what? Mark. Also, it means branding. What group of people were branded? Who? So not only were we branded as physically as a people, but also our what? Language. And Revelation talks about how this beast had control of what? Our language, our nations. Does that make sense, everyone? Is this making sense to you guys? That's why I just wanted to just lay down the overview here before we get into it. So interpolate, you guys know what this is? It means what? Let me bring it up. It means what? I gave you the cheat sheets. Let's say it with confidence. It means what?
Of a different nature. Something else.
All right, let's read together. Everyone, what does it mean?
Something of a different nature. Something else.
All right, so if you insert something of a different nature into something else, now you're creating something. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, and she breaks down the key points of what these people call the Masoret, right, or Masoret, right, or the Masoretes. But the key is, it says, the inventions of the Masoretic points, which are supposed to give vowelless words of the scriptures, their pronunciations. All right, but we're dealing with what? 9th century. That's not antiquities. That's Middle Ages. By the time you get to the 9th century, 9th and 10th century, they call it the Middle Age proper. That's not the ancient Israelites. Does that make sense, everyone? All right? But she says here that this was the invention of the learned and cunning rabbins of the school of Tiberius in the 9th century of our era. All right? But the key what she said here, right, in this this entry here, she said that they added more confusion to the text. Because it says here, made thereby confusion still more confounding. The truth is that this scheme has only added additional blinds to those already existing in the Pentateuch and other works, because you're already still trying to understand, based upon what we've been taught, that we're not under the law, but then you read the scriptures and you see that a lot of references to it. Isn't that confusing? But then they create a language that's like, wait a minute. Now you're saying we gotta know the dots, these vowel letters? Isn't that confusing? He says here, right, that the Hebrew Bible, as it is issued from the pens of its inspired authors, was written without vowel signs of what kind? Any kind. It says whether points or what? That's going back to that word what? Accent. It said it was written without what? Oh, come on now. It was written without what? Well, you see how we're bringing it all together? So when you hear someone saying, Aleph, Red flag, stranger danger. Gamel. Stranger danger. Yeah. Stranger danger. Yeah. Stranger danger. We're going to have to clean this mic, right? How you gonna say it, not spray it, or spread it, right? But you see where I'm getting at, right? That should be what? A red flag. Okay? But look at what it says here. It goes on to say, they there constitute no part of the what? Original writing, but were interpolated. So it's saying these dot systems, these vowel letter systems were not part of the original language, period. All right? Let's go to another section real quick, and I want to close out to it with another source. It says here, in the first place, then about 2 centuries after the termination of the Babylonian captivity, now we're going from the Babylonian captivity into what? The Medo-Persians. That's what this is getting at. And while a considerable number of persons still continue to speak pure Hebrew, in other words, the language of who? The language of who? We just gave you the source, right? Showing that they were in what? Captivity to the Persians. So 2 centuries into after this Babylonian captivity, that means that they're in whose captivity? The Persians. But nevertheless, a considerable number of persons still continue to speak what? Pure Hebrew. In other words, the language of Judah, Lashon Yahwadah, as their vernacular dialect. Asia was invaded by a people who had introduced it to the original alphabet. Now it transitions from the Babylonians, the Persians. Now it's getting into who? The Greeks. Look at here. All right. It says here, right? The Yahwadah were in consequence forced, in spite of their prejudices, to learn a species of writing that made them acquainted with the use of such letters. In other words, vowel letters and points. But the key here, it says, I want to get to this point here. It says, this rendering of the Old Testament into what? Greek. All right. Just give me 2 more minutes. All right. I want to get to a key point here. I'm not going to get into the Willie Lynch. All right. I'm going to get to a key point. All right. All right. But this is what they try to say, right? Much too far in praise of the Masoretic system of vowels to assert that it completely preserved the ancient pronunciation of Hebrew or kept it exactly the same as it was from the very outset. So it's making a point that they didn't preserve the original pronunciation. Does that make sense? Let's see here. And this is where they try to, water it down, but still, that they are not such as, in the least, to affect the sense of the scriptures. In other words, even though we know that they're teaching a language that's not even biblical, adding these accents to the letters, but it doesn't affect the actual meaning of the word, of the text. Is that true? Wow. All right, stranger danger, right? But remember, the key thing to this quote, it said that they targeted keywords. I know I'm kind of, this epiphenomenal association between consonant letters and vowel sounds was then seized upon and used in words without historic diphthongs. Remember, what is the key diphthong that we highlighted? That we read in Revelation chapter 1. When we see that transliteration saying, I am the Alpha and the what? In the Greek language, that's pointing to all kinds of sexual stuff, sexual sacrifices and all of that. That's not a Hebraic thought. So when you combine those letters together, that is what is called a diphthong. 2 vowels coming together to form what? 1 sound. So when you say Yahuwah, that's a Greek diphthong. Does that make sense to everyone? You're taking the alpha and omega and making a sound into it. That did not preserve the ancient pronunciation. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. Real quick, diphthongo, or diphthong, we're gonna stop right here, but let me just pull the definition up. It says here, a diphthong is a sound made by combining two vowels, specifically when it starts as one vowel and a vowel sound and goes to another, like the oi or the sound of oil. But look at what it says.